Hello, I'm Nyarai Mureithi. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought a whole new set of challenges for children and adults with autism spectrum disorders and their families. According to the Center for Disease Control, the COVID-19 pandemic is often more severe in people with autism spectrum disorder because of their immune disorders and comorbidities. Shane is a young boy living with his mom, and he has the autism spectrum disorder.
My name is Maria Muinde. I'm a widow first. I'm a mother, and I'm a research assistant. I was married to the late Tony Onyango. Ten used to play for, at his time of death, locally used to play for KCB Rugby. He was also part of the core team that represented the Kenya 15s, and he also featured for Kenya 7s. With Tony, we had one son. His name is Shane Muinde Owalo Onyango, a boy named after both of our dads. Shane was clinically diagnosed as autistic with ADHD back in 2018. Okay, when Shane was 1 year, 10 months, we had started noting some funny behaviors. And like a normal child, when you give them, say, toy cars, a bunch of them to play with, instead of driving them the normal way kids do, Shane will arrange them in a straight line. So his idea of playing, it's not what you normally see with other normal children. And other than that, my friend and my mom had raised a concern that there could be something wrong with his hearing, because whenever they'd call him by his name, they say he never used to respond. After a while, you notice you're calling him, he's no longer responding to his name. And there was also the issue of he could no longer follow instructions, because you could send him, he won't do what you want him to do. In fact, he won't even respond to me talking. So that was our first clue that something was very off. Even if I can say we were a bit prepared, the moment you get a diagnosis, it's not the same. No matter how prepared you are, it will always be hard. You can never be fully prepared to hear that your child has a disability. And in our case was disabilities, because he was not only autistic, Shane also has ADHD, that is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It was quite a blow. And readjusting to life afterwards, we just had to learn that, to accept it. And immediately we were given the diagnosis. Shane had to be started on occupational therapy, and the first step was sensory integration. So for us, there was no time for the PT party. We just went on with it. The next step was signing him up for speech therapy. And at the time, we used to go for therapy at Kenyatta Hospital. Unfortunately, unlike other kids who can tolerate being in a room with so many students, Shane couldn't handle being surrounded by a lot of people during his therapy. So our attempt at speech therapy was a total fail at the time. The thing about autistic children is they thrive on routine. So we had formed a routine that revolved around Shane, myself. At home, that was Shane, myself, and Tony. So in the morning, I'd wake up at 5:30 in the morning to prepare his bathing water and his breakfast. Tony will wake up at 6 a.m. As well as Shane. So he'd feed Shane his breakfast. Then I'd make sure he has gone to the potty. That was the second stage. Afterwards, he'd bathe Shane and get him dressed in time for leaving school. So that was our morning routine. When he came back in the evening, most of the time, I'll get home in time to pick Shane. So I'd fix him a snack. We play around a bit. Then I'd prepare dinner. We'll eat with Shane. Most of the time, he'd fall asleep before Tony got back home from either training or coaching kids. So the bedtime was actually, again, it was his routine, something special between him and his dad. So even if Tony got home and Shane was asleep, the agreement was I'll never tuck Shane in. That was his job. At least for him, he always wanted to make sure that even before he sleeps, he gets to see his son. Yeah, that was our routine, and it's something that worked very well. That is until March 3rd. That night when Tony came back home, he passed on. The matanga lasted for 2.5 weeks before Tony was buried. And during the matanga, the government also introduced the school closure. So that means with Tony's death, everything about his routine had been disrupted, all the way from meal times to bedtime, school. So that means it also contributed to a lot of frustration, especially for the child. He gets really frustrated, which also brings around temper tantrums, and he starts having meltdowns. And it's already bad enough that he has to process his father's death. And for a child who's autistic, who's also nonverbal because Shane doesn't speak, you can't, unlike a normal kid who will ask you where the father went, Shane won't. The measures the government has put in place to curb the spread of coronavirus, things like putting on masks, maintaining social distances, sanitizing, have really affected Shane in the sense that he has hypersensitivity, especially to his head. He doesn't like things that touch his face. And just like everyone else, Shane has to wear a mask when he's going outside. And for him, the fact that it actually touches his ears, rubs on his face, touches his mouth and nose, can be a very uncomfortable experience, something that is functional assessors says it's actually on the borderline of being painful. We have to factor in the use of sanitizer, especially in public spaces. He gets scared of, at first he was very scared of the sanitizer because of the cold feeling sensation he'll get in his hands. The other challenge with is staying indoors. When you're told to stay home, and this is actually the biggest challenge for any autism parent, especially those who have children with ADHD, because normal children are hyperactive. So factor in that ADHD is actually an abnormality that revolves around being too hyperactive. So when you tell a child to stay home, to stay indoors, that means he doesn't have enough playtime. Remember that this is a child who's not going to school. And when you're telling him to stay at home, that means he'll have a lot of built up energy. And him jumping around the house, running around the house is still not enough. So he suffers so much because he has so much pent up energy. And that brings around issue with lack of sleep or very limited sleep. Because with the energy, it's very hard for someone to fall asleep when you're not exhausted. So nowadays, normally he'll sleep past midnight as opposed to before, whereby say 8 or 9 o'clock he was already asleep. Another major challenge we experience as autism parents is explaining the pandemic, what corona is to the children. And this is an nonverbal child, so whether or not you explain it to them, actually when you explain it to them, you don't know how they perceive what you've told them. First of all, you don't even know if at all they've heard what you've told them or how they perceive it, because these are kids. When you tell us to avoid touching face, it's already hard enough for a grown-up to keep your hands, like avoid you touching your face. Now it's even harder for a child to avoid sticking their hands in their mouths. It's quite a challenge. One thing the government needs to factor in when it comes to handling autistic children, especially now when schools are locked down, most of their therapies facilities are locked down, is considering like the services for autistic people as an essential service. The same way they have quarantine centers is the same way they can have centers whereby our children can get access to help, the kind of help they need, say occupational therapy, speech therapy. Yeah. Another thing that keeps on coming up, especially in my discussions with other special needs parents, is the need for aid to be given, especially to families who come from low-income settlements. A lot of people actually affected in the sense that some lost their jobs. So you'd find destitute families who relied on, say, the Juakali kind of jobs, like now out of work. And when you're out of work, therapy is already out of the question. So you find that they're also struggling financially, and meal plans especially play a major role in how to contain your children's disabilities. So there's also need to raise awareness, especially when it comes to registering our children under the National Council for People with Disabilities. So a lot of parents don't know there's such a council that exists in the favor of our children. So when you factor in especially those parents from little to no income homes, this is something that can be of great help to them, considering there's money that is usually given for them to support their children.